Welcome back to the Sandman podcast, and in this episode I'm going to talk with Josh. We're going to discuss the path towards financial freedom before your 30s, how to optimize your time, and how to manage the relationships along the way. It's an amazing episode. Let's dive into it. That's one thing I never did before as well.
What's it do?
So when you edit, you have three sound
You
lines,
can match out the bytes.
and you know exactly where what
Clever.
videos. Yeah.
I'm going to take that on board.
So in the beginning, I was like listening. Okay, he just said what there. Okay, this one said what there. Click there, and go from there. And like something that now is so simple and easy to do that takes like 10 seconds.
That's fully why they do it in the movies, eh?
Yeah. And just look at it, and then you know. But in the beginning, it was just. But everything in the beginning is, you know that.
Got to get the reps in. Just got to get reps.
I'm so excited to talk.
Me too, bro. Thanks for making time out of your busy day. Glad I got to chat to you before you head back home.
Oh, this is wonderful. Thank you. I mean, time flies by so quick.
Oh, yeah.
Like to imagine that a year is already by.
No, that's wild.
It's really crazy. It's really crazy. I wanted to start by asking, like, where did you get all of this motivation from? Like, how did you become this way? Can you tell me about the time where you sort of got this focus of, like, I know my purpose, I know this direction I want to go to, and I just want to get like financially free and go in this direction?
It's a good question. I think it started when I was quite young. We had a very competitive upbringing. So I'm the oldest of three brothers, and we just competed. It's just a competitive household, and my dad is super competitive as well. Healthy competition, but our family has a very addictive nature. Like a lot of my relatives, and just my family in general, is very addiction is quite strong.
Okay.
And kudos to my parents for kind of working that out early days. So we got put into healthy addictions, is what I would call them. Like early days, my parents realized the importance of sports and being sporty kids. So they put us into fucking every sport that you could possibly think of as kids. I think we started in soccer, and then then we played league. I think we even did a bit of union. But I remember playing soccer, and as a kid, I was never like an aggressive kid. I didn't like the whole competitive. I was real chill, and like a full sports game would be going on, and my middle brother went up a grade to play with us. So we're playing, and he was playing goalie, and I was sitting in the field picking daisies. I was just like full chill, just you guys do you. I'm just gonna hang out here. And I think my parents worked out pretty quick that it'd have to be a highly stimulating sport to get us interested.
Yeah.
So then we pivoted into surf lifesaving.
Oh.
So, like running, swimming, paddleboarding, ski paddling, and all of those together is the Ironman sport. So we grew up doing that. And as a kid, you don't know any different. Like what you grow up with is what you grow up with.
Yeah.
So we were training like 15 times a week. Like we'd swim every morning at 5. We'd swim 5 kilometers every morning, and then run. As you got older, you'd run sometime during the day, like on a lunch break or whatever. And then in the afternoon, you meet at the club and do your paddleboarding or your ski paddling, and you do that 6 days a week. Have Sundays to just literally vegetable on the couch.
Yeah, you need that after a week like that.
Yeah. So like growing up, that was kind of our standard of normal, and competitiveness kind of brought out the motivation. And not knowing it early days, but I was never like naturally gifted. Like my middle brother especially, he's definitely worked super hard, like absolute credit to him, but he seemed to just get things quicker, like just had that talent. And I think a lot of it is him growing up with an older brother. Like he was always punching up. So like whatever I was doing 18 months older, he was always punching up. So for his age and how quickly he picked things up was awesome, because we were just super competitive. But it always took me a long fucking time to get things. And that kind of instilled discipline and motivation early days. And then when I was at uni, I had like one last year of competitive sport left in me, I guess. And I was like, there's other priorities in life.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to see what I could do, and I just like committed a whole year to it. And I wanted to be top five Ironman in Australia for my age group, which was under 19s. And just committed a year to it, and just brutal training, just brutal lessons, and really good coach back in the day too. Like just very much, what do you want? I've taken athletes there before. You sure you want that? Yes. All right, well, this is what's required. It's like phone calls at 4:50 in the morning. If you're not at the pool, it's like, why are you sleeping in? Like, get up. So that taught me pretty early days that if you want something, it's fine, but there's a cost, and there's always a cost. So that motivation in me kind of translated to, if you can get results like that, then that framework must apply to everything else. So it does. And I thought, well, fuck, we really struggled with money growing up. And I didn't know any different as a kid. It's all you know. Like, I thought we were cruising because we like lived close to the beach. After I think after I was 6 years old, my dad was home a lot more. So I was like, oh, this is the best. We must have like won the lotto or something. But turns out like his business fell apart, not to his fault, like hardest working bloke that I've ever met to date. But that kind of reinforced that, you can't just, he's a very, very skilled carpenter. But he didn't grow up with us. Like, we have access to everything online. Like, if you want to learn about business, you can learn about business.
Yeah.
That wasn't around back then. Yeah. So he was very skilled in that department, but didn't have the business training, and got screwed. That's why it fell apart. But that kind of distilled that deep-rooted motivation of, I'll retire them. And I know as parents, they don't think it, and we've had this conversation, but I feel like I owe it to them. Like, they brought me up with everything, and I want them to be able to enjoy their last 20, 30 years of good health, doing whatever the fuck they want. And I know it's achievable. And I decided that when I was like 22. 22, I properly decided, and then just been working towards it since.
That's so awesome. Would you say that intention, one that just clicked, that you said like, oh, I'm going for this, I'm going to do it, is that when it really started happening? Like,
manifestation's a wild thing, man. Like, people sleep on that. It's a bit like woohoo. Like, it's fucking real. And if you know what you want and you have the courage to speak it, you automatically start putting things into place to make it happen. And that's what I found early days of, saying, I'm going to give up drinking, for example. If you say it to yourself in your head, it's like less weight. If you say it out loud, has more weight. If you say it to friends, it's got more weight. And if you like record it and share it everywhere, it's got more weight again. It's like a accountability. And the more accountable you are, I think the better that you can stay on that path. Because to me, from my own experience at least, the most important work is when no one's watching. Like, if I'm hanging out with friends, like, this is awesome. To me, this is spare time. Like, I've blocked out spare time to hang out. But when no one else is watching, like, it's work all the time. And some people see that as like, oh, what a miserable life. I love work. I love what I do. And I learnt early days that this was going to be at least a 10-year process. And I couldn't do something I hated for 10 years. So I was willing to sacrifice a few years, early days at uni, to kind of like get, uni, I don't necessarily agree with it completely. I think just needs to be more transparency around the debt. And I don't think people know what they're doing. I was caught with that. Like, when you go to university, on average, $50,000 degree, and that's indexed at the 7% return. So, people don't explain compound interest young enough to young enough people, and it works against you. And if you want an education and you deem that really necessary, then 100% I think you should do it. But make sure that's your choice and you know what you're doing. Because I think a lot of people have a lifetime of debt that they're not even aware of. And I didn't agree with that side. but it is what it is, and it's my own fault for being ignorant to it. So I try to help everybody else that's going to uni, just make sure that it's your investment. And when you shine up to a class, the average class is between $3,000 and $6,000. So make sure that for that time period in the semester while you're there, that you're actually there. And I think it is good to get exposed to lots of different parts. More than anything though, it's just kind of like gives you the credentials that you know how to learn, basically. And then I think that's super important for the long-term plan. Early days, sacrificing a couple of years to find out what you actually like and what you could do long-term. And then for me, I didn't even know what I wanted to do. I just knew that there was money in tech. And my parents, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, and we got screwed a couple of times with tech-related things. And that frustrated the shit out of me. And I think there's some sort of superiority complex of, well, it can't be that hard, I'll just fucking work it out. And then that resulted in me doing a deep dive for a few months, then studying at uni, and then going on to my 10-year stint in tech.
Because would you say that what you learn in uni is essential as if you want to know how to learn, if you know how to study certain things? And because that's the basic, like what they teach you at uni isn't really the information. They teach you to become a person that's able to learn, study on themselves, by themselves, and also just know what is true and what is not. Or would you say it's something else as well?
It's a good question. University as a whole makes sense, right? Like it makes sense that if you have people who have done what you've done before, they want to give back and educate. So they would go into a university system, teach what they know from their experience to help the younger generation get better at what they need to get better at. The problem I have is lifetime academics. And straight after university, where I was fresh as, never worked in tech, never been involved in it, I was offered a position to mark grades for students in the course that I'd just gone through. And I did that on really good money at the time. But that was because I got high distinctions in my courses, and like back to the whole work ethic thing, if you're going to be there, fucking be there. And I kind of like had these realizations at that age of like, a student who did really good in a course can then mark a course, even though I haven't had any real world experience. That kind of like didn't sit well with me. And like, it's a pretty easy job really. Like you have a set of standards and it's like, you need to meet these standards. This is a high distinction, this is a pass. Like it's pretty simple to do. But I don't like the idea of a lifetime academic being able to be taught a course and then go straight into a teaching role, because there is a significant difference between theory and action.
Yeah.
And I just don't agree with it. And the lifestyle, just from my observation of academics and lifetime academics, is not healthy. Very sedentary lifestyle, like sitting at a desk all the time. They just weren't healthy people around me. So I didn't want to indulge in that.
Did you find that the study you did because your study was in tech, you said?
Yeah.
Did you learn the things you wanted to learn to get into your own business from it? Or did you still have to find out?
It's a tricky one, man. Yeah, it's a tricky one. Like I definitely learnt useful things. More than anything, I learnt that how you carry yourself is more important than a skill set. Because what's a good example? Like if I walk past you and I'm like, how's your day? And you're like, oh, not bad for a Monday. That tells me a lot about your personality and how you see life and what you look forward to. And like if you're in a job that you hate, you can do something about it. And I think at uni, it taught me a lot that how you choose to show up translates. And I wanted to learn, so I was choosing to show up. And it taught me a lot that like in business, it's about the people. And it's your people's skills and ability to recognize incentives. And, we were talking before about curiosity. That's like in my opinion, business and curiosity go really well together. Like if you're curious as to how something comes to be, I was listening to a podcast on the way here that the stock market is a business, like it's privately owned.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So there's just like levels, and it's like a 60% return on profit. So you're like, you just don't know what you don't know. And I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors out there. And yeah, I think that uni is good for education, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it taught me what I needed to learn to get my job, purely because of the amount of information that is out there at the moment. And, you know, like there's the education industry is worth trillions. And there's a lot of other people coming out now trying to create alternatives for the education industry. And I think now more than ever, people that, you know, like university isn't the only way. And I hire people, and I'm telling you now, if I'm given the option between someone fresh out of uni with no experience and somebody who spent those 4 years in the job, I'm taking the person with experience. And that kind of made sense to me early days. So I think obviously there's areas in life that you need, you know, if you want to be a doctor or something, you need that credential. But I think there's certain areas, depending on what you want to do, like I wouldn't recommend going to university for business, because the university is a business and it profits off you learning there. So it's in their best interest to teach you for sure, but what are their incentives? Like, what are the incentives of your teachers? You know, like, are they going to show up and give you the right information? There's nothing forcing them to do that. They just get paid a salary to show up and teach. Whereas there's like heaps of people on YouTube, and the transparency is huge. You know, like if you've got a YouTube channel, you don't have to go through any systems these days. Like you can provide really useful education for business based off your experiences of actually doing something. And they personally profit, or their team of media people personally profit directly from the consumer. There's no middleman taking a clip. Right. And that's in their best interest to deliver better content because it directly impacts their revenue stream. So if I wanted to learn something, in my instance, it's tech or business. That's what I do. Other industries would be different. But for me, I'm going to people that are incentivized to do better. And if you're making money off a YouTube channel, like you're going to do everything you can to make it the best for your consumer.
Yeah, the incentive or why they're doing it.
Yeah,
has such a big impact.
Oh yeah.
Because if you just get paid and you show up every day, then it doesn't really matter if one day the information flows a bit better than the other day. But on a YouTube channel, you get very fast, if you say the wrong things too often, then who's going to watch?
Yeah, and it circles back to accountability. You know, at university, if you have a tutor, that tutor is in a certain position of power that gets to dictate like what your grades are, how the course is. You know, I've had tutors at university just because I had a good relationship with them and I know that I go above and beyond every assignment. I reverse engineer it. Like if you're getting the assessments, I start with what's a high distinction, and then you do your assessment based off that. So that when the time comes, you go, well, you said this was a high distinction, I've done this. And there was times where I got like bad grades and I just asked them directly, well, I've done this, this, and this. Tell me why I didn't get a HD. And some of them would make up bullshit stories, and some of them would be like, oh, sorry, it was the person marking, I'll get that changed for you.
Wow.
And then coming out of that and being in the position of marking, the person who was teaching me how to mark said, well, there's a few names in the course, you know, like when yours was coming through, and for example, this and this person, they just always go above and beyond. So you can pretty much assume that you're going to give them a HD. Like that's the marking mentality, because you've got to think that these people are getting paid per assessment to mark over a course of X amount of hours.
So they want to mark as fast
It's in their best interest to mark as fast as possible.
So you see that a lot now when you're hiring for yourself, for your business?
I'm not hiring as much anymore. I've got a small team, and at this point, that's perfect for me. I'm mindful of the game that we're playing, and I don't want short-term revenue. I'm more looking for like, how can I make as much money as possible whilst providing the most amount of value as possible. And I don't think that there's necessarily a difference between value and money. I think money is a commodity that we agree to trade for value. You know, like if you want a fence built, you're like, I'll give you this money for a fence. You know, like if you want a website built, I'll give you this money for a website. But what I struggle with is I hate that exchange. To me, like money is just a quick way to get what you want. I like the value side, and I really respect people's money because to me that's hard earned. Growing up, like we didn't have much, and everything that we got was hard earned. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to take, like if we built an application, for example, for $100,000 and it was a six or 12-month project, it's a return on investment that I'm thinking about immediately. Like I know I can build it and I have a team to build it, but I'm immediately thinking about from the business's standpoint, what is desirable, what is viable, and what is feasible. So like desirability, you have to have people that actually want to use your stuff. And a lot of the time in business, you think that you know what your customers want because you're in it every day. And you might be right, but you might also be wrong. So the quicker that you can actually get something to them, the better. Because then you're testing with the person who's actually going to be paying you for the service.
They're going to use it.
Yeah.
So.
A lot of people get caught up with that. They're like thinking about designs. You're like, oh, well, this looks pretty and we should move this there. I work best with people that understand their opinion might not matter and mine might not matter either. That's fine. But our opinions are based off our experience respectively. Let's put them together, do what we think is best, but we have to have a time frame to deliver on. Because if you get caught up thinking about like this color or this thing should look different here, it really doesn't matter. Like it's got to be desirable. People want to have to use it, and it has to be viable. Like what can you charge people to use that? And again, circling back to value. If your customer is going to use this software that you're building and you're going to charge them $100 a month, how can you produce $1,000 worth of value? So every time they pay that 100, they're like, oh, thank God, like super valuable. You reverse engineer, similar to the grades, like you reverse engineer the product based off that. And the feasibility aspect is up for us to decide. Like we know, and especially being in the industry for a long period of time, that's where a lot of people make mistakes too. They're promised the world, but as soon as they sign the deal and they get going, they're like, oh, we actually can't do that. Or this is going to actually take us X amount of time. That annoys the shit out of me. If you're going to have a professional engagement, you want to know upfront what can be done, how long is it going to take, how much it's going to cost, and what return on investment will I get. Mm-hmm. That is a fucking fun game to play.
I mean, it sounds tricky as well.
Yeah, but tricky is, I could say the same thing for jiu-jitsu. Like jiu-jitsu looks tricky.
It is tricky, but it's fun.
Yeah.
I see. Oh, that's really cool. So would you say that the quicker you can make the decisions and the quicker you can get the ball rolling is the quicker you can get feedback? Because the moment you get feedback is where you can make changes and adjust, right?
Yeah, you want to create a loop. There's like a discovery, development, or like discovery, design, development, deployment, and then back to discovery. So like you have a little discovery session of what's the problem we're trying to solve. Like we can make one up. You got any problems?
A bunch of problems.
Let's just do one for jiu-jitsu because we both love jiu-jitsu. All right, so say like BJJ Fanatics is like a course content where you can go and watch videos and learn stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have an application on the App Store.
Could be, I'm not sure.
And
I had a quick, the website, right?
Yeah, I had a quick browse through their website. It's like not the easiest to navigate. So if we're building something for that, you have your customer and then the clients. So your customer is whoever's going to actually use that to upload, like Craig Jones or Lock and Giles or whoever uploads content to teach people. That'd be the customer that pays for our service. And then the client would be the customer's customer. And they would pay you for your content. So it's important to understand, like, is it a B2B application, like business to business, or is it B2C? Because if it's business to consumer, sometimes there's a middleman as well. Like in that instance, you build the software for providing educational content. So you got to work back from like who the actual customer is. And those situations get tricky because the business, in this instance, the one that's uploading educational content, will tell you how they want the app built. But it's not for them, it's for their customer who's going to pay them for it.
And the business gets the feedback from the customer and
Correct.
You're only contacting with the business.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where you have gray areas. And I think this whole idea of like you can build, this applies to like everything in life, to be honest. And this is why I think some of the most interesting people I know are other software engineers because they just have a really unique view on the world because their head is constantly going through like try-catch statements and if else, like we're very much if this scenario happens, do this. Else, do this. And you're always thinking about the different outcomes and what you would do. It's very like analytical, just bullet points. And sometimes it can come across as emotionless, but it's just being a realist. And
Logic, right?
yeah, it's logic. It's just logic. So that becomes fun because in that loop, you would discover, like your discovery would be all around like what else is in the market, who are the competitors, what table stakes do you have to compete? Meaning like if you look at 5 different education providers, what are they all doing? If you don't match that, you won't be able to compete with them. Then you have your differentiators, which are like your specific to your niche or your industry. What can you do that's better for your customer? Mm-hmm. So you combine those together and then you do your design, development and deploy. Once you've deployed it, you want customer feedback ASAP and you want to make it as frictionless as possible for people to give you feedback. Because if I say to you like, Tom, like, can I get your thoughts on this jiu-jitsu app? You would have every good intention to do it. But when we stop having our conversation, you're going to get on with your life and I'm going to get on with mine. Like it's not easy to remember. So some way to capture that word of mouth in person and, email communication and text messaging, especially at a small scale with other businesses, is a nice way to do it. And you can just be really specific with your questioning. If for example, right, like say this app goes out and you put up content teaching people how to do triangles, then I'm saying like, how do you like the app? It's a very open-ended question and it's going to take a long time for me to get the answer that I want versus, hey Tom, what's one thing I could do better? Like it immediately changes how you think and you're looking to provide me with a solution.
And it's just that one question straight away, you get one answer and you can put it in a list, see if there are multiple people with the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's all about quantitative and qualitative surveying. Like quantitative can be, like an email survey goes out and you've just got a few checklist items and they're just like, yes, no, this could be better. You're just getting it out to a lot of people. And then the qualitative can be like a group discovery session where you'll sit down and go, like, well, I love this for my use case. What did you think? And you can have like an hour conversation with some key people that are involved. And that an hour conversation saves months of back and forward on emails and phone calls. And then, so you've developed and then you've got all this information. And say you've got all that information by month 3. What people think is like, this is where we want to start. This is where we want to finish. And the path looks like this. It's like, if you get to month 3, chances are you're going to have to go back and come down and around and then, like the path changes. If you actually looked at the path to success for software, it's very much dictated on how your customers use it and what they think of it and how they talk about, like we have a gym software called Waterfire and anybody else that owns a CrossFit gym just hates it. But it's our system and it's got all our members on it and it's like not that bad. It gets it done, but it's really painful in some situations. So like, yes, you've got a customer, but no, that's not a good customer relationship to have. So you want to try to avoid that as much as possible. Because if somebody came into our gym and was like, hey, we built this alternative, I would move across immediately. Just trying to keep those relationships. Just because people keep paying doesn't mean it's a good service. I think it's super important to have good relationships with your customers and actually check in with them.
And really see if they enjoy using what they're getting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And, it's something as simple, people get email spam all the day. It's something as simple as just having a customer success team member that just calls the people that are using the software. Like they have our billing information, we pay for it. Just call us. It's a 5-minute phone call. And most gym owners, most business owners in general don't have spare time. So they're not going to beat around the bush. They're just going to go, it's shit because of this, this, and this. It's the customer successes person's responsibility to write that down and do something about it.
That's really cool.
Yeah, you feel like a lot of the time being on the other end as well, I've found super beneficial. Like having my own business, running my own software, having employees, you very much feel the pain points. So I find it unique because I'm able to build software. It's like I've felt all of those things and you know what makes good software. So just do the simple things really well and you'll have a good product.
I like that last sentence. Do the simple things really well, you have a good product. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Can you just explain to everyone that doesn't know what your business model is, what do you do? Like in a few easy sentences, so that they understand this whole conversation.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. If I was to summarize, I would say, well, I own and operate a gym with some friends in Currumbin, but we have a manager in there now and some really, really good people coaching and leading that space. So it's allowed us to just really enjoy the community and go and train. But like we built that business. So now I would say, I'd probably say like, it's hard to explain, but if I had to boil it down, I'd say software engineer is the best way to put it. Like we build software for people. It's just people's idea of a website is very much different to what it actually is. You know, people talk about websites and the first thing that probably comes to mind is like your mum or your brother or your friend knocking up a WordPress website for a business. You know, like that's what most people associate. But we build real websites and web applications for businesses. A lot of the time that's businesses that work in a space that have a software that's kind of monopolized their space. You know, like construction companies use a specific, I'm not going to name it, but use a specific software platform, but the licensing scales with the amount of users that you have. So it can cost these companies between $30,000 and $50,000 a year to use this software.
Oh, because so many people are using it?
Yeah, and it gets to a certain point where the business is generating revenue at a scale that it makes financial sense to just invest and build their own software as a better version because they're the ones that experience the problems every single day. So they know what they want and they've used a shit version for so long. So we would build software for them to replace the software that they were using, and then they could on-sell that to other people in their area or in their industry that feel the same problems. Does that make sense?
It does. So, but for you guys to be able to do that, you have to understand the software that they've been using them as well, right? Or
Yeah.
how do you go about like finding that out?
Yeah, and this circles back to like what you enjoy. Like I enjoy that. So for me, I've got the lens of like, we bought our gym 2 weeks before COVID and it was shit time. Like we learned a lot of lessons the hard way scaling that business. But not realizing it taught me a lot of really valuable lessons about business. So I'm able to have that lens of what actually works and what actually matters. And the software, like the bachelor's that I did at uni was software engineering. Mm-hmm. So like then coming out of uni and actually working in it, you get a really good fundamental understanding of software. There's just not that many people that I've met that know both. Like you normally have business consultants, which don't even own their own businesses. They've just studied business. And then you have like software people, the really good ones, just know software. Like they just love it. They love problem solving. And a lot of the time they'll problem solve problems that aren't actually beneficial to the business purely because it's a really hard problem. And when they solve it, they're like, yeah, I solved it.
They like it. Yeah.
Which is awesome, like awesome mentality to have. But it's just making sure that, you know, when they're solving those complicated problems, they're actually benefiting the business as well. Like that's where my kind of two skill sets merge. And to answer your question, like with how do you go about understanding their software, it's kind of like any other sport or skill. It's like the more reps that you get in, the quicker that you can understand it. And for software especially, it all follows the same principles. Like the infrastructure is all built around, you know, object-oriented programming and what different pieces in the business or business model, what different pieces are there and how do they interrelate together. And then you're going to build some software around that. So, you know, like at a construction job site, you might have like a job and then you have an employee and then you might have vehicles and then you've got your main company. And your main company might have one or many job sites. Each job site might have one or many employees. And every employee might have one or many vehicles. But there also might be vehicles attached to a job site. So that database relationship management, once you like done it a bunch of times, you can kind of at a high level go, oh yeah, based off using this application, they'd be storing this sort of information, which means that they could be able to do this thing. And you can very quickly see gaps of where they could be built better. And a lot of the time you can find bottlenecks too, you know, like this was built in this really specific way, which made sense at this time, but that's not going to be scalable. So, you know, like you can do a deep dive into a software. I can play on a software for a day and pretty much understand the full ins and outs of it, just because you got like the business lens of like why they're using it, what they want out of it, and the software lens of like, yes, it can do what we need it to do, or no, it's got these bottlenecks.
Okay, so if I get it right, you're able to have the helicopter view above like the business,
Yeah.
where you see all the different processes and people working, intertwining with each other.
Yeah.
And then you have the helicopter view of like the software background to be able to see like this is possible and we can connect it in these ways, and you can see how the software they've been using before, how that is correlating to like the situation now, and you see like, that needs to change for this all to work smoother.
Yeah, it's kind of like the conduit between a business and their own software team, I guess. You know, like, and again, looking at logistics, if you wanted to bring a software developer in-house just to have a software developer by themselves, you're looking at like 150 grand a year for a good one, at least. That software developer has no context of business. Like all they do is software every single day. They love it. So my value proposition, circling back to value, is if you can spend that same 150 grand in a year, but have a team that's got myself that understands business and software, and we've got a senior developer, a couple of junior developers, and a designer, like you've got like a extension of your business to work with for that 12 months. And at like the amount of time that you'll save, because what happens, and I've seen it heaps, is you'll employ, you know, like a consultant's a good example. If you employ a consultant with no business experience that hasn't run their own business, they see things through a different lens. Sometimes that's good. A lot of the time they miss stuff. And if you have a specific mission as the owner, like you want your business to be here in 12 months' time, and you're moving along at a really busy pace, like anybody who's owned, operated a business knows that like it goes very quickly and there's lots of moving parts. So I just want to make sure that when somebody invests, they're actually investing. And I'll have the conversation like 3 months in. If it's not going how we think it's going, like we'll sit down and go, we thought we could do this, and this have popped up. We've reassessed and we think that this is the best option. What do you think? And we have that conversation as early as possible because you're investing. At no point all getting together and going like, this is the perfect thing that we should build. And then in 12 months' time, you're like, this is the perfect thing that we should have built 12 months ago. Like shit changes.
You have to be quick.
Yeah, so having a fast-paced moving team that you just have monthly catch-ups, check-ins, like this is what we accomplished, this is what we're moving towards, and just keep pushing forward is what I would say like the sweet spot.
Because a business owner knows that things change.
Yeah.
So
it's just easy to talk to, man. You know, like if you go talk to a jiu-jitsu person, you've got things in common. Like you can relate. You have a good conversation and it's fun. Yeah. It's the exact same with business. Owners, especially for me. I love talking to business owners because I get it. And I'm really interested in what they're doing and why. It's easy for me, for whatever reason, to retain that information. And, you know, like even when I'm not working with people throughout the week, I'll just be like, oh, that would be sick for this person. I'll send them a text and have a look into this. This would be sick for this, and this. And without knowing, a lot of the times, that's how you end up getting clients. Because when their business gets to a point of profitability or they've got some extra cash flow and they want to invest, who do you think they're going to talk to? Like the person who actually cares.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
really cool. Yeah, it's cool how you can combine those two. Also helping people and just your brain is always going and having new ideas pop up.
Yeah.
I wanted to circle back to, we talked about this later, a while back, how you block your time and how you go on these sort of real focus work stages. Can you explain a bit more how you like structure those and when you choose to do them?
Yeah, for sure. It kind of big picture circles back to like, I think you can have whatever you want, but it's at a cost. And as long as you're willing to pay that cost, then you can do it. But with in relation to time blocking, I think you've got like you've got your weeks, but then you've also got, for me at least, I look at weeks and then a 6-month period, 12-month period, and a 5-year period. And you know, when I was 17 years old, it seemed like a lifetime, but I was like, oh, I'm already so old at the time. But I just wrote down on a piece of paper, by 25, I'll own a home, have my dream car, have my dream partner, and be happy. And I'm 27, so it was a couple of years later, but all of them are ticked off. And like, I wake up every day, I'm super happy doing something I really love. And have a partner that is just the most incredible woman that I've ever fucking met. And having somebody in your corner like that is legit a life hack. Like, you would know, man, like having a good partner is just a life hack. So I think when I look back and reflect, all of that was built off the discipline of saying, I want this in this period of time. And logistically, I would need to be making this amount of money each month. What skills do I have? How can I provide as much value as possible? And then deciding, like, in order to do that, I need to learn these skills. So I'm going to dedicate this 6 months to doing it. And I really do believe that most people have good intentions. I don't think most people sit down and look at what their last week was like. Because if I asked you, like, what did you do last week? If you rinse and repeated that for the next 6 months, you could pretty accurately tell me where you would assume to be. You know, like with your podcast stuff, if you kept doing podcasting for the next 6 months, you could pretty safely assume that your podcast would be much better, just given your nature and your willingness to learn. I think that's the same for everything in life, whether that be wealth, fitness, happiness, like your purpose, whatever it is. If I spend an hour with Emma every week for the next 6 months, what do you think the relationship will look like? You know, it would make sense if there was some sort of resentment or we didn't feel as connected. So I'm very mindful of that, and that's how I block out my time. We will decide that it's a season. And the cool thing having a partner and doing it together is you can decide on your seasons together as well. And Emma has supported me through quite a few working seasons, and almost like leveling up in the working seasons, you know, like going from what I thought was a sweet corporate job to running an agency, to our own startup company, to now like wanting that to keep booming whilst just solving complicated problems for other cool people that run businesses. Like, there's a lot of different seasons that you go through. And training seasons is a great example too, you know, like you might want to do, for me, it was like a 3-year stint of CrossFit because I just identified that I didn't like how I looked and I wanted to get jacked. So I knew that I had to put a season in place. If you've ever been to a CrossFit gym, like my beliefs of a CrossFit gym were shattered. My beliefs were like, oh, it's where you get injured and people don't move safely and it's not sustainable. That's what I was telling myself. And then I showed up and there's this 50-year-old dudes that are absolutely crushing all the 20-year-olds and they're moving perfectly and they've sustained this for a 20-year period. So immediately all my beliefs are shattered and I'm like, okay, like make sure the story you're telling yourself is true. And then fast forward like 3 years later, we own it together. But it's that intentional time blocking that has worked for me on reflection. And, you know, like I sat down with my partner, Emma, recently because she's owns that fuel bakehouse store in Burleigh. So we both knew that if she was going to buy into that, it would be a significant chunk of work. And we could assume that for the next 6 months, it would be pretty much consuming. And we both made the decision, mindful of the impact of the relationship and our general well-being. Like, yes, it will be challenging. But again, if we make that decision and we rinse and repeat that behavior for a 6-month period, where do we expect to be? And I would say, based off the people involved and what we're doing, both of our businesses will be in a profitable position. And if I rinse and repeat that 6 months for 5 years, you know, like it makes logistical sense to me where we get financial freedom. And I know where that, and my definition of financial freedom is just a passive income where you don't have to show up for work. So I would say that's a lot closer than what I think it is, but you can make a pretty good educated guess of when that will be if you're doing things that lead to it. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so then your weekly routine for me is broken down based off that. So I want a working season and I want to, whilst Emma's building the bakery and she's at work all the time, I want to take advantage of that. So I've shifted back into a working season and I'll do that right up until the end of June and then I'll reassess. I think it's super important to give yourself time. If you say, I'm going to do a working season and I want to learn X, Y, and Z, and I think I'll be roughly here, you have to stick to it. Like, you got to do the 6 month stint. When you finish it, because there's going to be lots of times throughout there where you're like, I don't want to work today, fuck this. And you know the feeling for training as well. Like, that's where the discipline first started. I don't want to get up this morning, it's cold, it's raining, I got to go jump in a pool, it's fucking 4:40 in the morning, I don't want to do this. But you've like made that commitment to yourself and you know that you're going to see it through. I think that applies for like your fitness, health, especially business and wealth. And at the end of the 6 months, if you go, okay, well, I overshot that, that was too ambitious, I'm really burnt out, and I can't do that again. Well, you've learnt something. So the next time you decide to do that, you know that you can shuffle your weeks around a little bit differently so that you don't burn out, so that it is sustainable. And I think like going to the gym, when you're conscious of those reps that you're doing and you're conscious of what your weeks look like, you can actually build a really efficient, highly functioning routine around your strength. Most people couldn't handle what I do, but that's because I love each little part of it. I think finding those things you love is super important.
Wow, that's a lot of great information. Quick, let me see if I get it. So if you're able to look back at your last week and you know how much you've put in and you know where you are now, that can give you a rough estimate. If you do the same thing you've done in that week for the next 4 weeks, in a month time, you know roughly where you are, right?
Yeah.
Something like that you use for your 6 month then as well, right? You know how much you can do in 1 month. So you estimate, if I do this 6 times, then I know I can be there.
Yeah.
And if I stick to this, I know I can get there. And then when you, at the end, you reassess, see if it's sustainable long term, or if you can do it maybe even more, depends on what you find out after these 6 months. And would you say that it's very important there to find the balance in like because you say if you want something, then you have to pay something for it, right? You can not always have everything.
100%.
So when you're in your working season, you know you're cutting away certain things.
Yep.
And that's why when your girlfriend is also in her working season, then you can both, you know that it's not forever.
Yep.
So you wouldn't have any like, sometimes you get that when you only spend like an hour or whatever, not enough with your partner.
Yeah.
It's a bit, you wouldn't, what would you say, judgment? No, it's a bit
Like a bit of resentment.
Resentment, that's the word. You wouldn't get that because you both know it's not forever.
It's important to set expectations because in my experience, resentment only comes when there's not clear expectations.
Yeah, resentments are expectations waiting to happen. No, what was the word? Resentment. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, resentment would, I'm not sure if there's a quote for it, but like to me, resentment would be like resentment would be unagreed upon expectations that are not met.
Yeah.
So if I say to you like, I expect that we're going to have an hour of quality time every single night. That looks different for a lot of people, and a lot of people just expect it. We don't expect that, and we're not expecting that. And if we have 1 hour for dinner together, we're very present. There's no phones, there's no distractions, like we're present and together. And I think if you have aligned expectations, it's amazing the progress that you can make. Because for a lot of people, they need each other and they need that time together. If we have half an hour together, we're like best mates, you just catch up, have a laugh, like we're solid. But that's also a foundation that's been built over the last 8 years. Like we just unconditionally love each other and have worked through so much and built each other up as people. Like there's no one that even compares to her, like nobody remotely close. And I think when you have that, like the life hack, it allows you to just keep moving forward. So the sacrificing, like the cost that's associated is oftentimes seems very important in the moment, but on reflection, it wasn't. And that's why I think it's important to give yourself the ability to test. Like a lot of people, myself included, would finish work, go home, play video games, watch an episode of Netflix, watch a season of Netflix, eat some dinner, go to sleep. I would say my average afternoon through that uni period, like early days, was, again, looking at that last week. So I wanted to do all these things, but I looked at the last week. I spent like X amount of hours gaming, X amount of hours on Netflix. They were awesome in the time, but what did they do for me after? And the brutal truth was nothing. That was really comfortable for me, and I really enjoyed that. And I thought that was our way of spending quality time together. Like, we would watch a movie together, and that was quality time. And I understand why people would think that, because you're comfortable. You're on a couch and you're comfortable together. You're watching something that doesn't require you to think. It's comfortable, it's relaxing. So I fully get that. But make sure that's a choice. You're like, I'm choosing to do this because it brings me comfort and we're spending time together. And if we do that, that's a choice that we make together. But a lot of the time, we would rather choose to have dinner and have no phones. It's harder initially to not want to go to the comfortable thing, but you connect deeper, you have a laugh. And if I asked you, like, if you had dinner with your partner for 30 minutes each night, or you watched a 30-minute episode of Netflix whilst you ate your dinner with your partner over a 6-month period, which one would you choose, and where do you think the relationship would be?
I would say I would be disconnected from my partner quite a lot, especially because you don't have that intimate moment of just the presence, like, hey, how are you?
Yeah.
Just look each other in the eye. And
Super underrated, man.
Yeah, that's really cool. How would you structure that if someone wants to start with the same type of way of working? Like, how can we find out like what's sustainable for them, or how can they even build their own sort of system that works for themselves?
Fail fast and fail often. Like, well, fail small, fail fast, fail often. Don't set super high expectations. And I think a lot of people, myself included, have really high expectations of yourself and of what you can accomplish. But there's a beautiful quote: happiness is reality minus expectations. If you have no expectations, your reality is happiness. And I genuinely believe that. I also think a certain level of expectations is healthy, because if you didn't have the expectation to do more, then you wouldn't ever do more. And like, I don't really believe, it's probably a deeper conversation, but my mum and family members, my mum has faced chronic anxiety and has been battling that for like over 5 years. And there's lots of depression, like in my family, like I've seen it, and we've had a few family members commit suicide, and it's heavy, and it's kind of made me think about it a lot. And I think that expectations of yourself is super important to be aware of, and super important to know where they come from. So I would say if somebody was looking to optimize their routine and get more out of themselves, I would say to be really compassionate to yourself. You know, like, start something really small, because the smaller wins that you get, the more it compounds like momentum. If you show up to the gym for one day and then you don't go for 5, you build up anxiety of going to the gym again. If you just went every day and you didn't do hard exercise, if you just like walked on the treadmill for 10 minutes, that's all you had to do. Like, if you get there and you really don't want to be there, do your 10-minute walk on the treadmill and then you can leave. Like, that's the deal that you make with yourself. Because once you're there, you're in a different environment and you'll want to do more. And if you don't some days, like some days you just bug it and you want to go home, that's fine. Like, you can do that. But lower the expectations and do what you think is really achievable, and just do that, and it compounds. And I think the big hack as well is making sure that your fitness and health is optimized, because we all have head noise and we all battle with head noise. And I think it's important to understand that, well, for me at least, it was important to understand that your feelings that you feel are for a reason. Like, if you're battling with anxiety, for me, it's normally unmade decisions or overcommitting. And if I make the decisions I need to make and I say no to things when I don't have time for things, I don't get anxiety. That's just me personally, but that's helped my mum and helped other people in my life with anxiety. I think the anxiety is directly, for me at least, related to being overwhelmed. And I think it's not something you can just drop. Like, you can't just drop it and it's done. But you can start putting things in place to slowly remove it. You know, like, if you feel like you've got a lot of social expectations, you have to go out. Saying no once, then trying to emotionally detach from the situation and get out of it and just look as if it was somebody else. Because we all have this innate ability to help others, which I love. But you can actually use that on yourself too. And that's what I've done for me. You know, like, pull yourself out of the situation. If that was any other person, what would you say to them? Most of the time, you would be very kind and compassionate and understanding. But for some reason, we have really high expectations of ourselves, and that the noise is different. And I battled a lot with that early days. So I tried this trick of inverting. So every time there was a negative thought, I'd invert. So, like, oh, you look like such a skinny prick. Like, immediately you're like, invert that. What's the opposite? Like, oh, you're filled out heaps. You can start rewiring your brain through conscious flips. And eventually that head noise becomes subconscious. And now I'm my own biggest supporter. But I had to train that. And I'm not sure what everybody else thinks. But from observing and talking to close friends and family, I think everybody has that in common, that they expect a lot out of themselves. And oftentimes, if it was somebody else if there was somebody else in that position, they'd be much more compassionate towards them. If they wanted to get really fit, be like, oh, that's a great goal. And it would be really good for your general health. And I'm sure that every day would become easier if you were happy and working out and moving your body. I think that's a great idea. Like, what do you think is achievable? Versus like, oh, you lazy fuck, you've only been to the gym once this week. It scales with your ability. Like, I get the head noise still, and it's a constant thing. It's like, for me, oh, you lazy fuck, you only did CrossFit 4 times this week with 3 jiu-jitsu sessions. You're fucking falling off. Like, you better pick it back up. I don't think it ever goes away, but you can realign the expectation and treat yourself like you were looking at somebody else. And I think that compassion can help you sustain it for a longer period of time. Just do really small things, and that will build, and be kind to yourself. Like, you want to be better. You have expectations because you want to be better. So every time you get a little win, like if you go to the gym and you haven't gone to the gym, that's a fucking win. Like, celebrate that win. Like, yay me. You build that momentum, and you start rewarding yourself for action rather than talking. And that was a big thing for me. You can talk the talk and tell yourself whatever story you want, but if you can't back it up with action, you're telling yourself a lie. And that's super evident in jiu-jitsu and self-defense. I told myself this bullshit story as a 20-year-old kid. If I had to, if somebody attacked me, I could definitely defend myself. Or if somebody attacked Emma, I could definitely fight back. You're telling yourself a lie. Like, if you've never done a muscle up and then you go into the gym, do you think you could do a muscle up? Like, no, it's a skill you have to learn. So why, especially as men, why do we assume that in that situation we could defend our loved ones? Like, fighting is a skill. So that belief system was hard to break. But again, like, what do you do about it? You go to a gym, you learn how to fight, you learn self-defense, and then you can get to a point where now, if you're in that situation, you can tell yourself that story of, I could defend my loved ones. But now it's a real story because it's backed with evidence.
And now you can believe it.
Yeah.
And be certain of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe everybody else is a bit different than me. Like, again, the software mindset is very much like, this is the logical outcome. So it forces me to be much more like brutally truthful. Can you defend yourself? It's a binary. Yes or no. 0, 1. It's like, yeah, there's no gray area. It's like, yes or no. I think that has been powerful for me, at least, to achieve what I want to achieve. And fucking shoot for the moon, dude. Like, the stuff that I thought was super important, like getting your dream car and owning your home and stuff, you all think that's like a lifetime thing that's super important. It's not that important. Like, it's just a goal that you can tick off. Like, the whole point of playing the game is to play the game. Like, you want to play it with good people, do something that you love, wake up every morning being happy. And I just don't believe that happens. I think you have to set that up over a long period of time. And once you do, it's a fucking life hack. Like, every day is fun.
That's really cool. Yeah, I agree with that. Especially when we realize that we can just adjust anything that we do. Because sometimes I think that's where that feeling stuck sometimes comes from. But we feel so much release when we realize again that we have everything in our own control and that everything we do came from our own decisions. And I find power in that it's like, oh yeah, I am in control. I can't, or the things that are in my control. I really like that about Stoicism. In Stoicism, they say only focus on the things that's in your control, and the things that are outside of your control, they don't have to be, you don't have to worry about them, essentially, sort of. But what triggered in my brain when you said about the time blocking and stuff, there was a new idea of like, I know what I can do now. I see what I've done last week. but let's just see what would be the best day for me. Let's see if I can do this.
Love that.
And then I would think, hey, but what would be the best week? What can I do now maximum? Like what can I do? Like, can I really do this? And then I do a whole week of everything that I can do, and then see like, okay, and use that as a reference point. But I can start with 1 day, then do 2 days and 3 days, and see if I can get to that 5 day or a week. And then maybe from there I can go to a month, and then scale it up. But when I hear people talk about like they go full work mode for 6 months, I'm like, shit, from 0 to 6 months, and I'm doing this. But it just seems so big.
Yeah.
But then making it smaller, like I can figure out what works for me for 1 day.
Yeah.
Then I can do it for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. Maybe do 1 day not, and then start again, do 5 days. But figure it out along the way, trial and error.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just like, there are no shortcuts. I see a lot of, like how to get rich quick stuff. To circle full back to what we were talking about before, like the value exchange, I'm a big believer in value. And that's why I love entrepreneurship and people trying to do their own businesses and like starting podcasts and doing stuff that they enjoy. Because to me, it's about adding value. Like, how can you add value to the close people around you? And like, again, circles back to wanting to help. And I think everybody wants to help and everybody wants to have an opinion. The brutal truth I had to face as a 20-year-old kid, my mate Gavin on a fishing trip said I thought he was asking for advice, but he wasn't. He was just talking about his situation. And then I made a comment of like what I would do. And he said, Josh, I love you, but you haven't been in this situation, so you shouldn't offer advice. And that has always stuck with me. Like, I can give you my thoughts based off my experiences, but I know what I know to be true because of what I've been through. And you know what you know to be true because of what you've been through. So if I haven't been through what you've gone through, who the fuck am I to give you advice?
Wow, it's powerful.
Yeah. And that stuck with me a lot. And tell who ask. Like, I'm a big believer of that too. A lot of my early days, like early 20s, even like mid 20s, 27 going on 28. So like through that 24, 25 period, I kind of felt the need to talk. And I was like, I'm working on this cool thing. I think that's great if it's coming from a place of wanting to share enthusiasm because you're like really pumped about it. But on reflection through that period, it was more about like being seen as doing something meaningful. It's like, I want people to see me as doing something meaningful. And again, like, I think there is no clear path in life. And for me, it's just that little course correction of, like, you don't need to talk. If somebody actually wants to know and they're interested, they'll ask you. Other than that, the best thing ever is you can just get on doing the meaningful work whilst no one's watching, getting the results that no one knows about. Like, that in and of itself is fucking powerful.
So exciting too, huh?
Yeah, it's fucking so fun.
Like, I always have that sort of, I watch sometimes some anime, and then you have that guy that works in the back in the shadows, and he has this real inner dialogue going on with himself. It's like, oh, we're gonna do this, and he does everything without anyone knowing. Yeah. And I feel like sometimes when I'm on a roll and I'm doing things that no one knows, I'm like, yes, I'm doing this,
love it,
man, doing that, and then I'm just like, shh.
It changes your confidence though, right? Because so I think real confidence comes with competence, and if you are competent at a lot of different things, you carry yourself differently because you just know that you can do it because you have a stack of evidence that you've already done it.
Yeah.
And people don't necessarily need to know the evidence, but you just carry yourself differently. It's like the learning to fight is a great example. You've probably been in a situation after learning to fight and somebody arcs up at you, you just don't match the energy because there's no need to. You're not trying to prove anything. It's like zeros and ones, like back to yes, no, binary. Like, yeah. Are you going to escalate this situation and are we going to fight? If so, let's go outside where no one will get in the way. Fine. But I would rather have a good night with my friends, and I'm sure you would too. So can you politely just go away? Like, you don't match the energy. It's not like, oh, get fucking raw. That, from my experience, is what creates the environment. And sometimes you get unreasonable people that don't want to level. But that's fine. Most of the time it's them trying to prove an ego, trying to prove something to someone. And I wasn't willing to leave that up to chance. Like, it only takes one situation where you get one person like that that could potentially harm Emma or somebody I care about. And I wasn't willing to leave that up to chance. So I think, for me at least, it enables me to be able to take Emma out to nice places and do stuff with her, and we can both relax and enjoy it. because there's not like the probability of something going wrong is much less, and that is very much an anxiety stress relief for me.
And it feels good, huh, to be able to protect whoever you want to protect and know that you have the ability to do something if it needs doing.
Yeah, and like you be the same, man. And I'm by no means ignorant. Like, I understand that people carry knives and weapons and guns. Like, I'm by no means think I'm invincible. But I think the likelihood of something happening is very low, and I'm not intentionally pissing anybody off. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I don't think people are out to get me. I'm a pretty nice, easygoing dude. I don't have any problems with anybody. Like, if you got a problem with me, you can tell me about it, and I'm happy to level with you. But otherwise, I've got no problem with you. Like, go on doing your life. I don't expect people to understand me, and I don't expect to understand people. It's just you do you.
That's really cool. That's a cool perspective, because in the end, everyone is different.
Everyone's different, man. And some people might be bored shitless of business and software and jiu-jitsu, and that's fine. It's totally fine.
But then you don't have to watch.
Yeah, fully. And it's like the more what's been true to me is the ability to be truthful to who you are. Man, life's just so much better because you attract other people subconsciously or consciously. You match what you put out. Like, if you enjoy business and jiu-jitsu and podcasting and you put that energy out there, you're going to attract other people that enjoy it.
It's so cool. It's so cool. When you let go of all the bullshit of the things that you think other people are thinking about you about. But I had this realization just a while back, because I'm very focused on myself and on doing things. And I was like, if I'm so focused on myself and doing this, if anyone else is as focused on themselves as I am now, you don't even have time to think about me or about anyone else. Like, it's like,
yeah, it's so true, man. And like in the thick of it like that too, you know, even bad people, I just don't really like. There's definitely some bad people, but I think most people have good intention. And in that situation, if you're doing really well and you're doing what you love, if they're insecure and they're not doing what they love, you are kind of got something that they want. And whether they're conscious or not, they'll start talking a certain way and saying things that aren't true, but make them feel better. And that's okay. Like, I got offended by that early days, but you can't control what people say. The worst thing you can do is buy into it, because now you're having a conversation with someone who is not even conscious of what they're saying.
yeah,
So you got to try to level with someone who's not even intentionally.
they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. So
they're just going.
The best thing ever that has worked for me is just unconditional love. Like, it sounds corny, but I got no beef with nobody. Like, you do your thing. If I don't agree with you, I'll let you know. And if you don't agree with me, I'd expect you to let me know. And I will never talk shit about anybody behind their back. And I think that's why I have such a good friend group, because every single one of them knows if I've got a problem, we'll deal with it face to face. And the only bad things I'll ever say are to your face as a joke, like friends do. I've got nothing to say about anybody bad. And I just think, I don't actually think people do it consciously either. I don't think people talk shit about other people consciously. I think it's a deep-rooted insecurity, and they just say what's easy to relate to. You've been at workspaces where they're like, oh, it's Monday. And they're like, oh, can't wait till Friday. And then it's Friday. Oh, can't wait till the weekend. I don't think a lot of them actually mean it. I just think it's an easy thing to talk about. And I think the same goes for gossip. Once you say what they say to you back to them in a kind way to, you know, like, make sure you understand what they're saying, they're like, oh, well, no, I don't actually think that. You know, so
That's funny. I've never tried that.
Try it.
How would you reflect it back then if someone says, it's
you know, like, talk about anybody. Like, Cougar, we both hate him, say something. But, you know, like, they could say something about anybody, and, you know, like, it might be an insecurity at anything. You know, like, you somebody from jiu-jitsu, like, so-and-so said X, Y, or Z, or did X, Y, or Z, and you say it back to them. It's like, and, like, is that true? Like, do you know that to be true? And then they'll question it and be like, oh, well, so-and-so told me, so yeah, I think. So, well, have you spoken to him? Oh, well, no, not directly. So, well, you should probably talk to that person if you've got a problem with that person.
Before, yeah.
And just having that conversation with somebody also sets a really good precedence, because no one will come and talk shit to me about another person, because they know that's the conversation we'll have. Have you spoken to that person about it? Do you know that to be true? If not, I don't want to talk about this. Go and talk to them.
That's really good.
It's a nice precedent. Like, I don't want to be involved in that. And I think you can exit yourself from that. And it's just a much nicer reality to be in.
It really reminds me of the time where I realized how to respond to people complaining all the time. And the response I found that works the best is, it's your life. So what are you going to do about it?
But can be triggering with that. Then what are you going to do about it? Can trigger some people.
I know, but what I found was that the people that like complaining, just because they like complaining,
do they though?
Well, some do.
Or do they like being acknowledged?
Maybe two, yeah. But one thing is sure, they'll stop complaining to you.
Yeah. And if everybody did that, wow, no complaints. But for me, like, deep diving on it, it was the acknowledgement thing. Like, people just want to be seen and heard. And you can do that in different ways. You know, I'll ask questions about, how's your weekend? How's the kids? Like, people love their kids, people love their hobbies. And if they really don't have anything, they love talking about the idea of hobbies. Like, you can ask people certain questions that get them thinking different ways. You're like, what was the best part about your weekend? You know, there's only one way to answer that. You're going to tell me the best part about your weekend. You're going to talk about something joyful. And if you respond with something shit, then it's like rewarding behavior. It sounds silly, but I think it really works. Like, if you have a set of morals and principles that you love, like you want to be around positivity, and somebody's being negative, you don't have to be a dick, but you can just politely navigate that conversation and reinforce the behavior that you like being around. If they tell you something interesting and fun, if you match that energy and you're like, that's so cool, like, how good's that? People want to be around that. And if they say something like, oh, pretty good for a Monday, and you respond with, oh, that's sad because you only got a certain amount of Mondays left. Like, they're going to be like, oh, well, I didn't really, and this happened to me, dude. I was laboring out of school at John Flynn doing, like, the fucking, on reflection, the shittest jobs. Like, we were redoing office renovations, and the worst ones were the patient rooms. So we'd go into a bathroom at a hospital and strip out all the tiles and all the plumbing, all the cabinetry, vanity, sink and stuff, strip it all out, repair it all and put new shit in. Some of the stuff that was in those sinks, man, disgusting. And through that time period, your environment shapes you. So people in the elevator and stuff will be like, how's your day? Pretty good for a Monday. This is why I'm a big believer that I don't think people necessarily like to complain. They just want to have a conversation, and that's the easiest way to have a conversation. Because this old fella, his name was Keith, I still remember him, goes, how's your morning? I go, pretty good for a Monday. And he goes, don't wish your life away, young fella. You don't got many of those left. And walked out. And I was like, fuck. I didn't mean to say it. I'd just been conditioned to say it because it was an easy thing to say.
And everyone says it in that environment.
Yeah. It's like, so I was like, I'm going to do Keith proud. Call people out on that bullshit.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a cool way to keep that in mind and then share it again.
Yeah.
It's similar to when I hear a lot, oh, I'm not bad. Yeah. Compared to when I respond and I feel amazing, I say I'm amazing or I'm phenomenal.
People look at you a bit funny.
Yeah, but it's fun.
It's fun, and it challenges their beliefs. Yeah. Because again, they're not bad. I don't think many people stop and actually think, I don't feel that bad today. And if so, then there's probably a deeper rooted issue they need to address. Yeah. But again, like, it's your life. And I think I had the realization very early that, like, when I had that chat with Gavin, he was like, you know, you shouldn't offer advice if you haven't been through it. Two conclusions I had were like, I'm going to have a very specific set of experiences, so I'll be able to help a very specific group of people. And if I do really challenging, difficult things and overcome a lot of hardship, I'm sure a lot will be in common, and you'll be able to advise and help on a lot of things because it feels good to help. Everybody wants to help. And the second thing was, you can't tell people what to do, but you can inspire by living a life that you want to live. And I think if you live a life that you find fulfilling, you don't have to consciously show up as somebody. Like, you're already consciously showing up as a really happy person because you're choosing to do all the things that you want to do. And I've been around those types of people early days. Even now, like my friends are those people. So when you're around that all the time, good luck not being motivated being around people that are like getting after something that they are passionate about. It's contagious, man. Like, you're just always like, let's go. And I think like you can put that energy out there and you can be the best part of every person's day. Like, if you have 100 interactions in a day, you can choose to show up as a really happy, authentic, enthusiastic person. And the butterfly effect, like if you have 100 interactions and 50 of those people carry that with them and they're like, that's a nice way to think, and they carry that and they talk to another 100 people, like, it spreads. So I think that you actually can make a difference in the world by just being truthful to who you are and what you want to do. And you show up as who you want to show up as. Like, you can choose. You can choose to show up and be all sad, or you can just choose to show up and be happy.
Yeah, it's powerful, because I can count on my hands the times that I got an honest comment on like, wow, you look amazing, or like something like that. I know when I was walking my dog and this guy that was just doing the post, and he said it to me, he looked at me, he's like, you're beautiful, you look amazing, have an amazing day. And he said it like that. Ah, shit.
Yeah, so he said that you have an amazing day?
And that just stuck with me, and I felt great that whole day. And it was just this one guy.
Yep.
And then I had different experiences, and I still remember all of them. Like, it's so powerful. And then I started doing it, of course, as well, because it's the thing that I've learned from Stoicism as well, is that something I like receiving is worth doing for another.
Something I like receiving is worth doing for another. I like that.
Yeah. So that makes me like, I like coming home to a clean house. Then my girlfriend most likely likes it as well.
I like that. I like that.
And so things like that makes me look from a different perspective as well. It's like, if I like this, then I'm not the only one that likes this.
Well, that's a nice frame of mind. And this goes back to the reverse engineering outcomes. So this is what I did for my relationship, at least. When I was like 19 or 20, I thought, this was like after I started MMA, and I was like, oh my God, I can't defend myself. It made me like challenge every belief that I had. And I was like, oh my God, is all the other stories I'm telling myself a lie? I was just like deep in the thought. And I thought, okay, well, if there's good and bad, you know what a good man is and you know what a bad man is. So then define what a good man is and work towards that. Because I think happiness comes and goes through your seasons of life. But when you have a good purpose, you can carry yourself through that beautifully. And for me, like, there's no better purpose than just being a good man. Because it's such a simple thing to say, but to me, it has so much depth. So the first part of that was like understanding who my dream person was that I wanted in my life. And you can reverse engineer the type of man that they would want. So, you know, if I wanted a beautiful, happy, enthusiastic, kind, caring partner who would be a great mother and just a great friend to have, what would that person want? Luckily, I already had it. So it was just about, like, I spoke to Emma and I was like, be honest with me, what things could I do better? And I'm talking over a 5-year period, like, what's the perfect me look like in 5 years? And this whole framework of give advice to yourself 5 years ago whilst trying to become your hero in 5 years. And I think like you being your own hero in 5 years is a cool frame of mind that's worked well for me. And when I was early 20s, it's like, to me, my definition of a good man would be somebody who is like jacked and can defend, like protect and provide. So, you know, like got a good stable job, and it's like pretty deep rooted too. Cause like for me, a good stable job, good means like I enjoy doing it and it's fulfilling to me and I can do it over a long period of time. So when I come home from work, I'm upbeat and I'm happy because like my dad is the most incredible tradesman I've ever seen. Obviously I'm biased because I'm his kid, but I also worked with him for like 4 years out of school, and it was punishing because cabinet makers are very much millimeter perfect and everything he does has to be millimeter perfect. So I was like, fuck. But I seen the toll that took on his body.
Yeah.
And he did it over such a long period of time. It's really rewarding for him, but he says often like he's over it. And I didn't want to ever be in a job where I couldn't come home and just be like happy. So I think that's a fun exercise, and everybody's obviously got a different definition, but for me, it exposed a lot of stuff that I wasn't content with. And I had an insecurity. I got bullied a lot through school and early days through clubbies and stuff. But looking back on it, like, you're kids, you don't really know how to socially interact. And I carried myself and took things seriously because I wanted to perform. And, you know, like, you try to make jokes and some people take it seriously. And yeah, I just ended up, the result of it was like, I got bullied and it is what it is. But it forces you to like deep dive on why. And I don't expect, again, expectations. I expected kids at that age to be compassionate enough to like look at what they were doing and be kind. Why? Like, they're kids.
Yeah.
So, you know, on reflection, like, I'm sure those people have got a lot of fucking stuff to deal with now, treating people so poorly. But as you carry yourself through life, you can decide like what way you want to go. And I'm a big proponent of like confronting everything you need to confront, because for me, it was like a drop in a backpack of weight. You just feel so free and you can just get on with your life. And the insecurity that was instilled into me was just being too skinny. So I was like, all right, well, what do you do? Go surround yourself with jacked people. Where are the jacked people? At the gym. Do they sustain it for a long period of time? No. So, well, most of them, no. So where's a place of jacked people that sustain it for a long period of time? And then that's where I ended up finding CrossFit.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that the reason for CrossFit? Because CrossFit is more sustainable over a long period of time?
Yeah, like there's, and people will argue this point, but the funny thing is, everybody that argues against this point hasn't, or everybody that I've spoken to that argues against this point hasn't actually tried CrossFit. They were the same as me. They were told a certain thing and they believe it because they were told it, but they've never tried it. So then I went and tried it. Belief system was shattered again. I was like, oh no, all of this is false. This actually is sustainable. Here's living proof of these people in front of me that are 50 years old, that are smashing all these kids and are fit as fuck. So obviously it can be done because I'm looking at it. So I was like, okay, if I stay around these people for 6 months, what can I expect to happen? Like, a fair expectation would be like you would start putting on muscle and filling out and learning new skills. Is it easy? No, but you can build over time.
And it works.
Yeah.
Because you can see the proof of
Yeah, like, you're looking at results. You're like, well, these people, what do they do? And that's like why I'm a big proponent of, I'll hear what everybody has to say, but I won't listen unless you've got what I want. Like, if you have a healthy, happy relationship, I want to hear what you have to say because you've done it. And I think there's a big difference between talking and doing. If you have wealth and you've got financial freedom, I'd love to hear what you have to say because you've done it.
You get your advice from people with skin in the game.
Yeah, people who have done it.
Because they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, if you're going to give me advice on running a business, unless you've run a business, respectfully, like, I don't want to hear it. And that's hard for some people to hear. But I think, like, again, the expectations, if you just lay the expectations down clearly, you'll push away and attract certain people.
And in the end, the people that you want to attract are the people that have done it. And they attract to you because that's the way they like to think as well.
Yeah. And dude, I'm shocking for it because myself, I would love to give advice to people about business and about happiness. And like, at the time, I was still working my own shit out, but you have this innate desire to help. And that was been a really good reframe for me now because, you know, if somebody asked me about relationship advice, I'm happy to weigh in on that because Emma and I have built an awesome relationship. But the key word is it's built. You obviously love each other, but you've got insecurities as kids. And if you confront those insecurities together, it's like investing in something. It compounds over time. Then you get to a place where like nothing is comparable. You're like, this is the best. And like, that's the same for business. It's the same for like any sport you choose, jiu-jitsu, surfing. Like, you do it for a long enough period of time, then you've got skin in the game.
And it's nice how you said it because you said choose. It doesn't matter what you choose.
Yeah.
And the same with commitment because commitment is choosing.
Yeah.
And it's you choose to be committed to. It's not something that just falls like, oh, now I'm going to be committed. It's like, oh, I choose. I want to be committed to this thing or to this person.
And I think a lot of the head noise that you have, it's super powerful just getting it out. Like, and I think a lot of men especially that I speak to struggle with this. It's like, okay, you really love this person. but for some reason you have a desire to have sex with other girls. It's like, okay, why? Like, do a deep dive on it, understand the root cause. When I looked into it, like biologically, it would make sense why we would want to have sex with as many people as possible. There's an awesome book called The Selfish Gene, which dives into it. It's epic.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
But like the takeaway for me, at least, was women, there's a risk involved with sex, right? If you have sex unprotected, then you have a risk of having a kid. So it would make sense why a woman, from an evolution standpoint, would be more selective of who they have sex with, because they have to carry that baby and raise that child.
And especially because it's still one of the most ways to die for girls.
It's hectic. Like, it's a huge decision for them.
Yeah.
But for us, what's the consequence?
Pretty low.
So if there's no consequences and it feels good, we're going to want to do it more.
Yeah.
So then, like, I had that conversation with Emma, and I was like, hey, I want you to know that I love you and I don't want to have sex with anybody else. But there's an urge there for some reason. I'm trying to work it out, and I'm reading this book, and this makes a lot of sense, and it's helping me process it. But I want you to know that it exists. She's like, thanks for letting me know.
So what you just became conscious of is that the urge is there, but the conscious decision is something else.
Well, here's the interesting thing that I've found. The urge was there.
Oh.
That's what's been the most interesting thing for me. Like, growing up. And I also think for dudes, it's an ego thing. Like, if you can sleep with a lot of women, it implies that you have some sort of status. So I think for a lot of men, it's an ego thing.
Yeah.
But when I dove into it, I was like, okay, well, I have this urge. Why do I have this urge? And that's why I didn't really relate to my friend group at the time, because they were sleeping around with other chicks. There was a group chat where they would just take the piss out of the chicks and just say horrible shit. And I'm like, I wasn't raised like this. This doesn't suit me. So I left that. But the best thing about having my partner was we've always had open discourse. Like, if you have an issue, it gets addressed then and there. You don't go to sleep with a problem. Like, if there's any problem, no matter how small, we just deal with it then and there. That's super fucking powerful to have in a relationship, man. And when, like, nothing's off bounds, most people, if they said, like, I have an urge to sleep with other girls, I'm not sure why, they would take that immediately of, like, I'm not enough. And, like, I just think when you can say that sort of shit with no expectation of solving it, you're just putting it out there.
Yeah. What
was mind-blowing for me is, like, over the course of the next year, over the course of the next fucking few days after it, the urge just went away. That's awesome. And I think there's another bit of psychology in there around, like, the forbidden fruit of, like, wanting what you can't have. And I think having that open discourse and dialogue is so interesting, because for my partner, I told him, I was like, well, this is the feeling. I don't know why. I think it's this. I'm reading this book. This makes sense. And she's like, okay, well, what do you want? Like, do you want to sleep with other women? Would that fill that void? And then when you're given the choice, you're immediately like, nah, I don't actually. But, like, being able to confront that was, like, really powerful for me. And now I've just, like, left that behind. And that deepness of connection is fucking awesome, because, like, there's no one else that compares. I just don't think a lot of people ever have those conversations. And I think it's so, from my experience, it's so powerful.
Yeah, the thing that I found out to have these conversations is, I spoke this out to my girlfriend, is if we both have the intention to always go back to, like, love, and doesn't matter in what type of fight or whatever we would ever get into, we say, like, okay, take a step back. We both have our intention. We both want to get back to how we like to look at each other and, like, be like from a love perspective. Then there's never a big, like, step towards saying something out loud that could cause a response that we don't want to see.
Yeah, it's also prefixing it helps as well. Like,
prefixing?
Yeah, like, you know, say I wanted to, in this example, right? Say I wanted to get the point across to Emma that I had this urge to sleep with other women.
Yeah.
If I just said that, obviously she's going to take that poorly. But if I lead with, hey, I'm battling with this insecurity, I've read this book, I'm trying to understand this, but I have this urge for some reason and I don't like it about myself and I'm trying to work through it. I just wanted you to know. Like, that conversation is completely different. I think having compassion for the other person and how they perceive things is super underrated.
Yeah, the setup there is totally different.
Yeah,
because the way how you lead into it.
It's like you said, you're going back to the love thing. So I find that prefixing it of like, I love you. Obviously, I love you. And I'm telling you this because I want the relationship to be built off trust. Like if you were feeling something like this, I would want to know. And it's just really nice place to be because like, I'll go away for a weekend or a week, a couple of weeks, no questions asked. She'll go out for dinner with friends, no questions asked. Like there's just absolute trust.
That's amazing.
It's awesome, but it's built.
Do you think that's the same with any other relationship?
100%.
It's not. It's friendships. It's business.
100%. Business is a huge one. Huge. Because if you can't emotionally detach, you're screwed. Like you have to be able to understand why people feel the way they feel and prefix conversations with intention. I can't just say like, I disagree with this. Like how would you expect them to react? How would you react? You'd be like, well, fuck you. Versus I hear what you have to say. I'm sure you put a lot of effort into that. This is what I think for these reasons. What do you think we do? Like get all the facts out on the table because most of the time you don't know everything. And I think being open to be wrong is huge. I'm happy to be wrong. I've built my opinions based on my experiences and I know what I know to be true from what I've been through. And if you've got something like jiu-jitsu or like CrossFit or like business in general, if you've got something that will shatter my belief system and force me to rebuild, I want to hear about it. Like, I don't want to live a lie. If you've got a better way to do something, I want to know. But I'm actively trying to be better every day.
You keep that white belt mentality.
100%, dude. It's so
Ask
powerful.
questions, not expect to be right all the time.
As soon as you think you're right, you're screwed, in my opinion.
Yeah, because then you stop the openness to being
Gotta
wrong.
keep learning, man. That's why I love being a beginner at shit. Always a beginner. Kite surfing is brutal.
Oh, have you started?
Yeah. My mate learnt it on YouTube and then taught me.
Really?
I thought I was going to drown, dude. I grew up in the water. I'm a competent swimmer. I thought I was going to drown. There's like videos of me skipping through the water with the kite, just fucking death looping. One of the hardest sports ever. But again, you get humbled. Like, why would you expect that you'd be good at this thing? It's the same as business, same as relationship. It's another thing. If you're not going to put time into that thing, you're not going to be good at it.
You need that, initial amount of time to grasp the concept of it. Especially with kitesurfing, because you have two things out of nowhere you put together. You're controlling a kite, but you're also learning how to go about like riding a board.
And here's a unique perspective that I've adopted. I think being a beginner in and itself is a skill.
Yeah.
So I think the more times that you're a beginner, the quicker you can be a beginner at things.
And the quicker you learn to learn, right? Yeah. Like learning to learn it's
a skill.
It's a skill. And you can learn to learn.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's fun.
It's the best thing. Oh man, I love this conversation. I could talk with you probably for hours and hours on end. That's awesome. But I just want to thank you for this amazing conversation. And I'm going to rewatch this conversation so often because there's so much good stuff in it. I've been rewatching all my own episodes.
Love that.
Just because the information, the people I've been talking with is so good. Yeah. That I'm like, okay, I need to use it in my own life more. And
I've been following along as well. You're doing a good job, man.
Thank you.
I look forward to see where you're at in another 100 episodes. Get those reps in.
Me too. Yes, exactly. My first goal is becoming in the 1% of podcasting.
21 podcasts.
And is it 21 or 20?
21.
21. Yeah, just hit the 21. That's this year. I want to do 21 podcasts this year. And I like already the amount of growth I've seen from like the first one that was just, I was so excited, but also like, ooh, I just had one camera and one sort of microphone and just start from there. And now I'm already doing it in a different way. And it's,
bro, you're putting yourself out there. You're doing something that is worth doing for you. It's inspirational. And you and Cozzy have inspired me, and I'm going to be starting my own one as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we can compete together. Another thing to compete at.
I love that.
Yeah.
Or another thing we can learn from each other.
100%. But that is competition, right? You learn from each other.
That is true. That's true. And I'd rather get good together and see each other.
It's the same as making money
at the top than just like looking down and it's like, here's the information.
This
is what I've learned.
You want to do it together, bro, for sure.
But my eyes have been you've probably seen it, right?
Yeah, bro, get some sleep.
The like yesterday I think it started happening a bit in the evening and I was like, okay, this is the thing that I that I had my whole life from that I was like a little boy. My mom and I would call it head snot. It's like because the only thing I had is snot. But because my eyes are so sensitive, when my nose goes like drips, my eyes start like tearing up essentially. And bright lights like this make my eyes go even faster, and then my nose goes again. So
let's turn them off then, bro.
It's this loop of becoming this sort of crying snotty thing. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. My main focus of my channel is making podcasts, and I interview people that excel in sport, in finance, in life. So if you want to check those out, they're on my channel. They're Sandman Podcasting. Enjoy. I'll see you in the next one.